Welcome to Mathlink, where we connect the dots. I am Mr. C, and in this unit, we're going to talk about how to solve simple algebraic equations. So let's get started. So in order to solve simple algebraic equation, and that's what this unit is going to talk about, this simple ones, and then we'll look at some other videos for more complex. We must understand an equation is a mathematical statement of equality between two or more quantities. It is always contained an equal sign. So we're talking about the equation, it contains an equal sign. A formula is a particular type of equation that states a mathematical rule. So we're really going to just look at how to solve equations. And we're going to start with some word equations and then go forth from there. So let's say we have a number plus 20 equals 35. So how would I write that? A number plus 20 equals 35. A lot of times we use the unknown as x. Say x plus 20 equals 35. That's how we set it up, okay? Again, our slide will show us this too. We could say x or we could say n being a number or x being the unknown. Now let's look at another one. Let's say 4 times a number equals 20. Again, these are setting up equations, how to set it up. So this is our problem. And how do we write down 4 times? You can say 4x is equal to 40. Okay. And so in our particular case, we can look at this and we can say 4x is equal to 40. Now, it's very important to understand both of these equations and how we solve these differently. Again, if you're writing down things, you may want to say that the opposite of addition is what? Subtraction, and the opposite of subtraction is addition, okay? The opposite of multiplication is division and vice versa. Now, to solve these equations, you do the opposite, and what you do on one side, you do on the other side. And it makes the equation balanced because it's equal. What you do on one side of the equation, you got to do on the other side to keep the equation equal or balanced. So very quickly, let's look at the n plus 20 is equal to 35. So looking at this equation right here, how would I solve for n? How would I, your goal is to get n or x or y by itself. The problem is on the equal sign, it is n plus 20. So just look at that piece. So how do I get rid of that 20 to get n by itself? Since it's plus 20, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to subtract 20 on both sides. Again, what you do on one side, you do on the other. Opposite of addition is subtraction. So when I combine these numbers or add it together, this would become 0. So I'm left with n by itself is equal to 35 minus 20. In our case, is 15. And once you get the unknown or to get that letter or variable by itself, that's your answer. So n is equal to 15 is your answer. So 15 plus 20 is 35. That's it. All you do is get that letter by itself, and then that will be your answer once you get it by itself. So let's look at the other one. 4x equals to 40. I got to get x by itself. So how do I get x by itself? It is 4 times x. So what's the opposite of multiplication is division. Now for division, how you write that, you just put a line. It's a little different with that adding, subtracting. With division, you put a line, and you put a 4 underneath there. That'll cancel out. But remember, what you do on one side, you also what? Do on the other side. And this will cancel out the 4. X is by itself, and that means x is equal to 40 divided by 4, which is 10. And that would be my answer. And always double check it. So 4 times 10 is equal to 40. And so that's how we write equations and basically how we solve equations, given if it's adding or if it's multiplying. Again, let's look at another type of problem. We have x plus 5 is equal to 12. You got to ask yourself, we want to solve for x, and you got to ask yourself, are we adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? In this case, we're adding x plus 5. Just look at that side. How do we get rid of the 5? So in this case, we subtract 5 on both sides. And again, it has to be on both sides to keep it equal, keep it balanced. This will cancel, right? And we're left with x by itself. The equal sign comes down, 12 minus 5. We do that. In our case, we end up with 7. And that'll be our answer. Let's look at this. We want to solve for y. Get y by itself. If you want to pause this and see if you understand the concept, go right ahead and see if we get the same answer. Since it's y minus 7 equals 10, we'll have to do the opposite sign. And so in this case, since it's subtraction, the opposite subtraction will be addition. So I'm going to add 7 on both sides. What happens is this will cancel and y is by itself. Your goal is to get the variable or x, y, or z by itself. So y is equal to, now 10 plus 7 is 17. And that's my answer. Double check it. 17 minus 7 equals 10. Now, for these type of problems, and notice it says 6x is equal to 30. It's a little different. It's written differently. It's 6 times x is equal to 30. And we want to get x by itself. Since it's times, the opposite of multiplication is division. And how we write division when we solve for these type of problems, use a line. So you say, let me just write this again. So you got 6 times x is equal to 30. And you just say divide by 6 on both sides. And that's how you show division on both sides. 6 divided by 6 is 1. So we've got x is equal to 30 divided by 6. Let's reduce that, which is 5. And that'll be my answer. X is equal to 5. And always check your answer. 6 times 5 is equal to 30. Now, let's solve for y for this one. And I haven't written the problem completely. So let's say y over 3, that's y divided by 3, is equal to 5. So this should be equal sign right here. A lot of ways you can look at this. So one way you can look at it, you can say is 1/3 times y is equal to 5. So that's one way to look at it. And I want to get rid of that 1/3 to get y by itself. So what I need to do, since that's division or whatever, we can also multiply both sides by the reciprocal, which is 3 over 1 or 3. Now notice what happens. This will cancel out with that 3 because that's like 3 over 1. So we end up with y by itself is equal to 15. Another way to look at it, let's look at it like this. We have y over 3 is equal to 5. So how can I get y by itself? Well, some of my videos, if you have looked at it, I talk about proportions. You can cross multiply. So this is the same thing as 5 over y, a 1 of 5 divided by 1. So you can move the 3 over here on this side. So it'll be y is equal to, again, 3 times 5, which is 15. And we still end up with the same answer. So know both ways. It's good to know both ways and make it a lot quicker when you know both ways how to handle certain problems. Now, I really want to get a little more complex with the problems. These are going to be simple expressions that we're solving, or simple equations, I should say, we're solving. And in this case, we're not just looking at x. So we got x squared is equal to 25. And this is a basic principle that you want to make sure you understand. We want to get x by itself. We don't want x squared. We want x by itself. So I'm going to write this again. X squared is equal to 25. Okay. Now, how do you get rid of an x squared? What's the opposite of square? That's right, it's square root. So in this case, what you do, you take the square root on both sides. Not just a square root, it's plus or minus. So that's very key. You can have a positive or negative number, and when you square it, you'll end up with a positive number. So you got to do plus or minus square root. A lot of students will just say, I just take the square root on both sides and get the answer. No, it's plus or minus. You'll see why in a second. So the square root of x squared would just be x by itself equal to what is the square root of 25, which is 5. So this would be plus or minus 5. Now check your answer. So we got two answers. X is equal to 5 or x is equal to a negative 5. That's another way of saying that answer. I normally write it like this, but if you want to write it like that, you can too. Now double check it. So 5 squared is what? 5 times 5 is 25. That's good, that works. But also look, what is negative 5 times a negative 5? 2 negatives is a positive, so that also be a positive 25. So both of those answer works. That's why you got to do, when you do the square root on both sides, you got to do plus or minus square root, because you end up with two answers for this particular problem. So remember that this is a good key, a good way how to solve these x squares. Now let's look at another type of problem similar to what we looked at earlier. Again, it's not completely written, so I'm going to write it for you. It is the square root of y is equal to 3. So let's write it down here. Square root of y is equal to 3. You want to solve for y, get y by itself. Y is not by itself because it's the square root of y. Now, how do we get rid of the square root? That's exactly right. We're going to square both sides. Again, the opposite. You always do the opposite. And what you do on one side, you also do on the other side. So how I'm going to write it, you say square and then square on the other side. What that does, it gives me y by itself is equal to 3 squared, which is 9. And that would be my answer for this case. 3 squared. Y is equal to 9. Hope this helped. Again, what we went over was just basically solving simple equations where you have to add or subtract, multiply or divide, or take square roots or square on both sides. Please look over the video again to get a better understanding, and also look at some of our supplementary material that we have on our Mathlink website that also will assist you. Again, let Mathlink bring it together.